Hi, my name is Kathy Ebersberger. I'm the chair of the League of Women Voters of Colorado Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force. Today, we're going to have an introduction into transgender issues. And I just want to remind people at the start of this meeting that in registering for this event, you agreed not to engage in any behaviors or actions that are harassing, threatening, or physically or verbally abusive towards any member of the public. And you have agreed not to create an environment that is intimidating, hostile, or offensive. This includes online activity. You also agreed that all knowledge and information gained from proprietary information and discussion in this event shall be regarded as strictly confidential and shall remain the sole and confidential property of the League of Women Voters. We're going to start off today with a few words from our executive director, Beth Hendricks, who's going to talk a little bit about the League.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here and for your interest in this important and timely topic. And thank you to our JEDI task force for putting it on. JEDI is one of 11 different task forces that the League of Women Voters of Colorado maintains. These are open to the public. You need not be a member to attend. And to those of you who are not members, welcome. We hope that you will consider membership, as I personally think that League membership is a pretty good cure for the helplessness that many of us feel these days. We're a great platform for action and education and discussion. So please join us when you can. Thanks so much. Back to Kathy.
Our speaker today, who's going to start us off, is Shauna Tracy. Shauna joined the League in 2024, and she's become a very active member. She is on the Legislative Action Committee for Immigration and LGBTQ plus issues. The Legislative Action Committee monitors all bills coming through the legislature and decides which bills we would support or oppose or monitor. Shauna is also a member of the JEDI Task Force steering committees, two of them. One is on immigration and one is on LGBTQ issues. She's also an observer in the Douglas County Commission. We have people that monitor all county commission hearings to make sure we know what's going on in the counties. And more importantly, she's the proud aunt of two trans youth. So I'll turn this over to Shauna.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We have a huge group, and I am so excited that so many people have turned out and just want to know more about this deserving community. Typically, JEDI, the last month or two, we've been doing presentations on immigration, and tonight we're making a shift over to LGBTQ, specifically the transgender community. And I just want to say, before we get started, that this presentation wouldn't be possible without the collaboration of a member of the League, who is also a member of the transgender community. She has been so instrumental in getting the information to us, but also helping us learn what it's really like to be a member of the transgender community. So I just want to give a shout out to her for her bravery and for her commitment and willingness to come out here tonight and make this evening possible. I don't think it would be possible without her. And the best thing is she is going to be available at the end of this session for questions. This tonight is the first of potentially 3 or 4 more like this. And tonight will be a sort of a trans 101, if you will. So I'm just going to go over the basics, and at the end, we'll be available for questions. I want to start with a quote. Though my birth certificate said female, I have always felt like a boy. I kept it inside for many years, spending countless sleepless nights being terrified of what my family and friends would think and worrying about being rejected at school. I finally transitioned to the man I am today when I was 20 years old. Though I have faced discrimination by many people since then, I have also received invaluable support. That is what keeps me going. I chose this quote and I love this quote because I feel like it embraces the journey from being unsure of how you're feeling in the body you inhabit to perhaps finding out that you're not alone in this feeling through the transition process and coming out the other side, feeling support and joy in your identity. I'm not suggesting that it isn't without hardship and without extreme discrimination, but this quote kind of summarizes the journey. And studies show that most transgender people, up to 99%, never regret making that transition. So let's just start with a definition, transgender. This is a broad term that can be used to describe people whose gender identity is different from the gender they thought to be when they were born. There's about 1.6 million people currently living in the United States that are considered transgender. About 1.3 of them are adults, and 300,000 of them are children ages 13 to 17. So you can see this is a very tiny portion of our population. About 1%. Some studies show it can be as little as 0.1%. They are all ages, all races, all ethnicities. And while they have gained more visibility in recent years, it does not mean that they are not still experiencing extreme discrimination and stigma. So transgender falls under a broad spectrum of gender identities. And I want to go over a few of those with you. Some of them you will be very familiar with, and some of them you may never have heard of. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction. This list is by no means all inclusive. It's just a kind of a starter of the different genders that are out there. So beginning with lesbian. Lesbian is a sexual orientation where a woman is sexually attracted to another woman. Gay is generally reserved for men, and this is when a man is sexually, physically, or romantically attracted to another man. Bisexual is when you are sexually or romantically attracted to both sexes. So a man could be attracted to a man and a woman, or a woman could be attracted to a man or a woman as well. Transgender. Transgender is the topic du jour, and this is an individual whose gender identity or sense of being, male or female or another gender, differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. Intersex. This is probably one you are not as aware of. This is a natural variation in sexual development where individuals exhibit characteristics that don't fit into male or female. These can include genital variations, hormone imbalances, chromosomal differences, and it's really important to understand this is not a medical disorder or some kind of condition. This is a very natural variation that occurs in about 1 in every 1,500 births. Hey, slideshow's messing up. Queer. Queer is a bit of an umbrella term and the Q can also stand for questioning. This is people who are just non-heterosexual. Their identity simply doesn't correspond to established ideas of sexuality and gender. Non-binary. Non-binary is a gender identity that doesn't conform to traditional beliefs that a person is either male or female. A non-binary person may feel that they carry characteristics of both sexes and don't necessarily identify with just one particular gender. And finally, two-spirit indigenous. This is something that we see pretty exclusively in indigenous communities. This is referring to basically multigender, cross-gender, non-binary roles, non-heterosexual roles. You know, because even though they fall under a large umbrella, sadly, the spectrum is not always one big happy family. Sometimes you will see gays and lesbians lobbying directly against transgender community. Sometimes transgender people will feel their way is the only way, and certain transgender people are not trans enough. So just like we see immigrant on immigrant discrimination, unfortunately, we see that again in the LGBTQ plus community. The terminology is dynamic, it changes. Transsexual was a term that used to be used for transgender, and it included cross-dressers. That is no longer used. It is just transgender or trans. Queer actually used to be considered a slur, which is now very widely embraced by the LGBTQ community. Pronouns are important. I am a cisgender female with pronouns of she, her. Some may go by he, him, or they, them. But it's important when addressing them to use correct pronouns. And if you are ever in doubt, just ask. Respectfully and privately, you can say something like, may I use your pronouns in this conversation? Or what are your pronouns? It's a signal that you respect them and you want to address them in the gender that they prefer. So sexual orientation and gender identity, are they the same? No, no, they are not. Sexual orientation is who you are physically and sexually attracted to. So for example, a lesbian, her sexual orientation is towards another woman, a gay man is towards another man. Whereas gender identity is truly how you identify as a human being. Do you identify as male? Do you identify as female? Do you identify as non-binary? And interestingly enough, a transgender woman can be a lesbian. She can be straight. So they don't, for lack of a better word, sort of interconnect. They're two very different terms that often get mistakenly used for one another. So sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. Gender identity is how you identify as a human being. So what are some important things to know about the transgender community? Transgender people have been around for a really long time. If you go back to the Two-Spirit in the indigenous communities, those people have been around for hundreds of years. It's not a new woke movement, contrary to what you might hear in the news. People are pushing back against societal barriers, especially the youth, and claiming the identity that they feel they were born to live in. This doesn't mean it's easy. This takes enormous courage and a long time and financial situations, but like I said before, they're more visible. They are claiming their identity more, but they are still facing a lot of stigma and a lot of discrimination. So what does it mean to transition? Transitioning simply means when a trans person begins to live according to their self-defined identity versus the sex they were designated at birth. It entails a number of steps over a long period of time, often under professional guidance. It's mental as well as physical. It can include hormone therapy. It can include puberty blockers, multiple types of surgeries, voice therapy. It's never a journey that is entered into lightly. A transitioning person, it can cost tens of thousands of dollars. And emotionally, it can cost familial relations. It can cost friendships. It can cost housing, jobs. So it's important to understand that every transgender person's journey is unique, and it's truly a path that they will choose for themselves. You'll even see that some transgender people will not choose to physically alter their body in any way. They will simply live in the gender that they prefer, rather than doing hormones or surgeries or anything like that. The bottom line is human biology is varied and it is very complex, and it should be respected and, I would argue, celebrated. So no doubt the trans community is currently under attack. Anti-trans actions are often intended to intimidate, using bullying in an attempt to silence dissent. They often attempt to stir up fear in the community, over people who are seen as different in some way. Trans people can actually be seen as test cases or an easy target for discrimination. This is an extremely marginalized community, so it is easy for people to consider them an easy target, and almost a practice run for discrimination on larger groups later on, such as other members of the LGBTQ community, women's rights, bodily autonomy, abortion, etc. Anti-trans actions are almost always framed as protecting something, such as protecting cisgender females in bathrooms or locker rooms. And similarly, those who verbally or physically abuse trans women often feel they are protecting the order or being the hero. These actions incentivize people to react to emotional triggers and look for simplistic solutions. It helps avoid the questions of who does this help and who does this harm, and actually caring about the answer. Applying labels to people makes them easier to single out, while ignoring the fact that being trans is just a small fraction of who they are as a human being. And further, relying on stereotypes and making trans people the other, it gives license to dismiss, to discard, to hate, to assault, and to even murder. So trans people, they're not going away with the stroke of a pen any more than any other minority group. However, there are numerous actions from the current administration underway and queued up to attempt to erase their identity. They are removing the word transgender from government websites. They are no longer tracking stats on transgender health. They are proposing to ban trans athletes. And currently, the State Department is blocking transgender, intersex, and non-binary people from getting passports that align with their gender. This move would out people when flying, trying to open a bank account, enrolling in school, and really opening them up to discrimination and potentially violence. Even though transgender actions are part of a larger agenda, it's so important that they be countered and confronted, because trans people are truly enduring mental, physical, and economic harm. So in what areas are their lives affected? With all of the discrimination and the stigma, they are hit in multiple areas, and I kind of want to go through each of them and give you an idea of how they're impacted. I'm going to start with medical. In medical, gender-affirming care may or may not be available. Providers may or may not agree to treat you. If they do treat you, it may be with disrespect or disdain. Insurance may not cover it. And honestly, trained providers are really hard to come by, especially in rural areas. Employment. Not being able to get a job. You may lose a job once you transition. You might be in a workplace that is disrespectful or refuses to use your correct pronouns or dead names you. Dead naming is when you use a name that a person used to go by but no longer fits their current gender. Housing. It may be really difficult to find a house. You could be removed from a house you are currently living in. And it could be really hard to find a welcoming neighborhood. Military. This is a big one we're seeing right now. You could find yourself with an inability to enroll in the armed forces, or you could be discharged for being transgender. Currently, we are seeing 15,000 active members of the military being discharged for no reason other than they are identified as transgender. Religion. Trans people are not welcome in many churches. They are often seen as sinful due to their lifestyle or their differences and their gender identity. Family and friendships. These can really suffer if you have a family that is not supportive. Communication can be cut off. Friendships can be lost. Access. This is the risk of being harassed when using facilities that align with your gender, such as bathrooms. Verbal harassment when you're out in public. Being refused service, etc. Legal is an inability to obtain a passport matching your gender identity, which is what we're seeing right now. An inability to get a birth certificate reissued after transitioning. Your driver's license could have the wrong gender. Your social security could have the wrong gender marker. And finally, education. We're seeing students being denied opportunities to participate in activities and sports that match their identity. And we're seeing educators being denied opportunities to teach. In fact, I read a story just recently that 7 in 10 young transgender kids state that they have received multiple death threats at school. So impacted on a variety of levels, and this is just a non-inclusive list for sure. So what are we going to do? How can we be an ally? It's so important that the League continue to combat misinformation and disinformation, which severely affects these communities. The League's work needs to be done within the context of this new environment, which truly weaponizes the government against groups for perceived political gain. Call it firing up the base. And as far as our work in JEDI, it should be viewed in the League context, defending democracy, individual freedoms, bodily autonomy, etc. So we urge you to educate, to advocate, and to humanize. Employ the usual channels to contact elected officials, write letters, and make phone calls. Do outreach to federal, state, and local organizations, school boards, even in the face of opposition. Participate in outside non-league events that center around key issues such as trans and LGBTQ rights. Pride Month is June, and I'm fingers crossed hoping that the League has a table, and I will absolutely be front and center. In your own circles, speak up and inform regarding groups facing discrimination, such as trans people and the LGBT community in general. Don't be afraid to comment on posts that you see are perpetuating a stereotype or putting out false information. You have the facts in front of you. And I feel that if you are a person of privilege with a voice, it is your duty to use that voice for people who do not have one. Perform small, incremental, consistent efforts. Change one heart at a time. You know, we talked about this in our immigration presentation. It can be hard in this polarized society, but start with people you're comfortable with, family members, friends, trusted colleagues. But remember that this is a community of people who want nothing more than to live in peace. To exist peacefully, they ask for nothing. So the persecution they're currently receiving is so unwarranted and so shameful. If you're here tonight and you want to learn more about the transgender community and how you can help them, then you are obviously a caring, empathetic person. And that is what you need to do more than anything. Just be you. Be caring, be empathetic. Transgender people are not freaks living on the fringes of society. They are your neighbors. They are your work colleagues. They are your providers. Just show up and care. That goes a long way. This last slide is some links and resources, and I want to leave this up These are invaluable resources, not only in the community for transgender people, they also helped us immensely with this presentation. So I'm going to leave this up so that you can potentially take screenshots if somehow, if you or someone you care about could use one of these resources. And then I'm going to open it up for questions. So I hope that tonight it was a very general, like I said, Trans 101, but I hope it educated you a little bit about the community, humanized the community, and made you want to stand up and support this community, this very deserving community. So thanks for being here, and thanks for supporting JEDI and the League.
So right now we're going to go into the question and answer portion of our program tonight. As we saw in the slides, everyone's trans journey is unique. And as Shauna mentioned, this program has been crafted from Jenna's experience. Jenna is a member of our Jeffco League. And Jenna is going to answer your questions now. And we want to thank Jenna for her courage. And please remember that this presentation is the first in our series. We're going to be having these approximately every other week. The next program, we will have a few transgender individuals to share their own experiences and their own journeys. So we hope that you'll sign on to that. This presentation today was just to introduce the concepts and to get you educated a little bit about the background information that you'll need. So if you'd like to ask a question, we ask you to go to the React bottom at the bottom of your screen on the toolbar, and it is the one that has a heart. And if you click on that, you can see a way to raise your hand. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. And I think we're going to take down the resources now so that we can see people's hands, if that's okay, Shauna. I think it's been up long enough.
Sure. Do you want me to just?
Yeah, just stop sharing.
Got it.
Does anybody have a question? Diane. You're on mute. Diane Radman.
Yeah, hi. Good evening. I just think it's important. This isn't a question, but I think it's important to understand that it's not appropriate to ask somebody who's trans if they've changed their name, what their name used to be, or to ask them about I'm probably not using the right term, their past life, or to ask to see a picture or things like that. That's just really behavior that's not acceptable in that community. So it's not a question, it's just a statement.
Thank you for that. I'll just read a couple of the things from the chat. And these are some of the things that people have noticed about what happened just in the last couple of weeks. Iowa was the first state to remove civil rights for trans people, and they made it impossible to change their birth certificates starting July 1st. Texas is pushing a ban on adult trans healthcare. The Department of Homeland Security changed their policies to no longer prohibit surveillance based on sexual orientation or gender identity. So these are just some of the things that happened just recently. And I think it's all happening really, really fast. So we all need to be cognizant of what's happening, and hopefully some of it can be stopped. Jennifer, you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, Jenna. I'm just curious or would like to learn a little bit more about what kind of support you had from your family, kids, siblings, parents, or what you go through with family members when you're trying to transition with all of this?
Oh gosh, Jennifer, I think I'm gonna defer talking about my own situation. I'm not quite in the position to talk about that. I can talk about things in general to reinforce kind of what Shauna was saying about what the process is. Many times you do lose, if you will, family members, or they become alienated, or you can become stunned. Many marriages do not survive, although a few that are really sound based on the love for the person do. I think there's another part of your question I can probably answer in general.
Sure. Um, I guess I wondered what kind of family support you had and how difficult that was when you didn't have the support.
Well, again, I'll answer it in general. The stats show, particularly with trans youth that are supported by their families, they prosper. They become the people that they really are. Changes in behaviors from pre-transition, even though it's not surgical at that point, but being who they are makes a tremendous difference. I'm always remember this very sad example of a young woman in, I think it was Ohio, and everything was just so bad. She didn't have the support. She just ran into the front of a truck and was killed. And her note said, "Fix society." I mean, that's kind of the visceral kinds of things that remain with a lot of us. Some of us have the process that goes a little bit easier. Some, it's very, very dreadful.
So, Jenna, can you tell us what kind of challenges the new executive order has made for you and other trans people you know? Can you just give us a general idea about what's happened since those executive orders went through?
Well, again, I'm looking for my lived experience. I'm a senior, retired, and everything else. So I'm not about to lose my job. Um, but for many, it's been very difficult. I mean, the fundamental premise of this is what Shauna talked about, is they're kind of trying to write us out of existence, basically. So all the implementing actions to the executive order, all these things that folks have mentioned in the chat, they get into sports, healthcare. I mean, even locally, we had Children's and Denver Health who had discontinued the trans programs for a while. It's really across the board. And in my case, I have a passport that says female, but I don't think I can travel as I want to in December because I might be detained at the border coming back for having a false passport. I mean, everyone's situation is different, but it gets into every part of your life. I have a lot of trans military friends, and hopefully a couple of them will be on the next session. And I mean, they're facing loss of employment. It's the loss of their mental life, their dedication to to this nation. They're signing when they sign up, they say, they're writing the blank check, and it might be even for their life in the defense of the country, and they're being treated this way. And I've got friends that are going through that. Folks that are on hormones right now, and DOD says, no, we're not going to cover hormones anyway. That's part of their trend, that's part of who they are. That's their gender affirming care, and it's going away in those cases. So it depends on the person, but even in me and sort of my privileged, retired state, it's still overwhelming to kind of look at my community and everything that's being done, and there's no reason for it. It's being couched in terms of government efficiency or something like that, but getting rid of 15,000 military members who are extremely, a lot of them are senior members. It makes no business sense. It's just out and out discrimination.
And you mentioned that um, Denver, was it Denver Health and Children's Hospital in Denver stopped doing gender affirming care for a while because of the executive order, and they were afraid to lose their federal money. So in a sense, there's a lot of self-censorship, is that right?
Yeah, I can't speak to those particular situations. I don't know, but I know in general that some of the institutions that offer gender affirming care for kids and adults have held firm. They said, no, this is important. We're medical providers, we do no harm. And others have sort of, obeyed in advance, which is super, uh, that's, that's a bad sign. You sort of capitulate just uh, when there's opposition. And I think the league is pretty good about saying, no, then we're going to stick up for, we believe here, we have principles. And
And I do want to say that both of those hospitals did restart their gender affirming care after some um, negotiations with our Colorado Attorney General, and I believe also some relinquishing of the freeze on some of the federal monies.
right.
I know that self-censorship, it really goes both ways. Could you tell us a little bit about looking for a house and the kinds of things um, that you do, and what kind of experiences a trans person might have when looking for a house?
Well, okay. Again, I can't speak from the personal experience of being, looking for an apartment and being rejected. I think a lot of these things, I want to kind of put this in the context. We've got tons of issues that are going on that are, across the board, and the transgender issue and the way we're being treated is just part of the equation. So we're not trying to single out the community for, we're the only ones being hurt. We're part of the larger hurt that's going on everywhere. Part of the research that I've done since I retired is actually kind of into analytics and artificial intelligence. I'm looking at a lot of context, and I'm looking at and it's a natural resource. So I'm looking at a lot of the way things affect each other and flow into each other. So in the case of housing, you may have outright a landlord that says, no, you don't look right or something. And they won't tell you what's going on. They'll say, oh, it's already been rented, or some story like that. But part of that equation is a lot of the transgender people, if have been denied employment and they don't have the income, then their housing things might be limited to follow. So that's part of how I think it all kind of, I see it fitting together in kind of a larger picture of one thing influencing another, and asking the question, as Shonda said, is who does this help and who does it hurt? And especially ask the question, who does it hurt and why?
Um, do you have to take into account, how do you take into account just generally day to day ensuring your safety?
Can you expand on that a little bit, Kathy?
Like, do you have to, how much do you have to look out when you're outside to see if someone's going, are you cognizant of being afraid or of having to take protective measures just in your day-to-day, to going out on the street and, going into a restaurant, looking for an apartment, or, just in your day-to-day life?
Again, when we have more other voices on there in the sessions, I think they can give a better answer. I'm retired and live rather a quiet life. I do tons of stuff outside. I'm in the Genesee Evergreen area, so for me, I don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
It was definitely a learning curve when I transitioned, and kind of like, oh, I see women have to be cautious in general about creepy people and things that go on that. So I learned that pretty quickly. One of the things that I've seen is that um, I don't know how to say this. I don't want to offend anybody, but a lot of the safety depends on whether you pass or not.
Hmm.
If you passing basically kind of means if you kind of look the part, if you go in a restroom and yeah, you kind of look like a female, your mannerisms are kind of like a female, then you're probably, not going to get harassed or anything else. Um,
And I
if
think you mentioned to
if
me
you're
that, sorry, go ahead.
no, and but if you're a trans woman that's 6'3" and 180 pounds and super tall, with kind of some stereotypical male kinds of things, then uh, might be a lot harder. We didn't talk about in here, and is really the intersectionality of stuff as well. So, I mean, I've got a lot of white privilege in that a trans woman of color or any BIPOC women would have kind of a double things going against them, and they could really be uh, have a hard time, a much harder time in society than I would. Or yeah, if you had, the Latina, if you were Latino or BIPOC of any kind, or you had a disability, all those kind of intersecting, identities can really make it extremely difficult for folks. So
Yeah. And I think you mentioned to me one time that one of your groups passed out cards for trans women to pass out in the bathrooms. Do you remember that? About a trans woman entered the bathroom?
yes, and nothing happened. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it was just a card that said a trans woman used this bathroom and nothing
right.
happened. And I
And
think that's really important is that people who are afraid of trans people in the bathroom are really afraid more of cis men pretending to be women coming in the bathroom.
yeah,
Trans women are not really the danger.
yeah,
Um,
and that creepy kind of stuff from guys, that's covered by existing laws. So, you
yeah,
can't do that anywhere. I did. I'm not trying to keep up with the remarks in the chat. Looks like there's been a ton of really good ones. But one actually kind of talked about butch lesbians, and they have a friend who's got short hair and it kind of presents as a butch lesbian, and she's had more grief in bathrooms than I have. Uh,
yeah,
and it's all these unintended side effects, collateral damage of a lot of females being harassed. In fact, that happened in the in the Congress. I think
right.
uh, a couple of women that are fairly well known for anti-trans uh, things made a big stink about there's a trans person in the congressional bathroom, and it turned out to be it was a natal female. And they
Yeah.
said, "Oh, we're sorry," and everything else. But I mean, it's like Sarah McBride cannot even use she's the delegate from Delaware. She can't even use the women's restroom at the Capitol.
Yeah. Shauna.
Yeah, I wanted to hop in and just say a couple of things. First of all, we have so many people from the transgender community here tonight and in the chat, and that is just so exciting to me. And I would encourage people to go to the chat and read the conversations because there's some really great conversation happening over there. There's also some great resources being shared. Erin in the Morning, who I know, Jenna, you I like a lot. There's just some really interesting stuff happening in the chat, and I would encourage everybody to go over there. And then also, I just wanted to share one thing that I just got a notification on. just some breaking news. A judge has just blocked President Trump's executive order targeting access to gender affirming care for trans people under 19 years old. So wonderful. That's a victory. We'll take it, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, I
And
just
there
wanted
was
to
a
say,
victory yesterday about
yeah,
the bill that got blocked.
yeah.
Because they didn't get 60% to go further.
Exactly. Sean, I just wanted to add very briefly, I've actually compiled a list of 4 different documents that for trans resources. And those are posted on the JEDI's, or at least one is posted on the JEDI website internal to League only. I've been working with One Colorado to see if we could even have a wider distribution of those, maybe to have them post the information, combine it with theirs, or just subsume it into everything that they've done. So we're really looking for partnerships on this, not trying to do it alone. And Sean,
Yeah,
I'm glad
and
you were able to look at the comments. I can't read and
I
speak at the same time, but
we need to make sure.
I hope I've done justice to the trans people here. Everyone's story is different.
yeah, and we're working on getting those onto our website, and I believe the Jedi Task Force webpage is open to the public.
Okay.
And you can get that at the League of Women Voters of Colorado website and go to the tab that says Task Forces and then go to JEDI. If any of the other trans people that are on this call have any comments that they'd like to say, please feel free to raise your hand and let us know your thoughts. The JEDI Task Force is the League of Women Voters of Colorado Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force. We know that DEI is under attack these days, but we're sticking with it. So anybody who would like to join the league and join the task force, that would be great. Kathy, go ahead. Kathy Hallahan. Kathy, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah. Everyone, I'm glad you're here and I'm glad I'm here to learn more. I have a question. At what age is it, I mean, up until now, or Trump may try to, but at what age are young people allowed medically to take, let's say, hormone therapy or other kinds of hormone blocking or hormone therapy, or I'm not sure what other kind of medical treatments there are for, I'm talking about, preteens and teens. What age is accepted now by the medical profession to start treating someone who's trans?
I can try to take a partial answer at that. I think I did see an earlier chat remark about WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and those are really the main folks, sort of the worldwide standards of care and the protocols that most transitioning people, if you follow those protocols, they're designed. It's not a fast process, but you go through a lot of the psychological things and talking to therapists and looking at all that. So they are the ones that probably give the overall recommendations. I think there are some other professional societies, especially the gender affirming care folks in major facilities. I think they probably have their own protocols. I'm not sure when that starts. The puberty blockers is one where it kind of comes up, but you've got gender affirming care that can be, for 4 or 5 years old, because a lot of us know from the get-go, from, when we're 2 years old, that we're different. We can't necessarily put a name on it, and sometimes we're shamed into, depending on the family situation, into, even be able to say it, but in some households, care looks like, your, who you thought was your, 4-year-old daughter wants to have a boy's name and do boy things, and the parents do that, and that's in the absence of any kind of, medical, psychological, any kind of evaluation.
I would love to just jump in really quickly too. I meant to say this in the presentation. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that children at the age of 4 have a really strong sense of what their gender is. So it is really not uncommon to see children very young, 3, 4, 5, 6, displaying signs that maybe they're experiencing issues with gender. I am in no way, shape, or form advocating for a child of that age to begin a transition process. I'm just saying that the gender identity is pretty solid in a child really early on.
Yeah, and the whole thing is going to be unique to an individual. So I think we have to say that's a decision between the parents, the child, and the doctor.
Yes.
And the first step would not probably, the first medical step would probably not start until they get into puberty or right before puberty with puberty blockers.
Right.
And those are very safe. They're used by cisgender children and transgender children, and they're reversible. So I think it's hard to just say, well, at a certain age you're going to go on this medical regime. It's going to
Right.
be something that's unique to every individual, and it's really going to depend on the child, the doctor, and the parents. Um,
Absolutely.
so there's a
Jenna, there's
couple.
Jenna, there's a question in the chat, and I don't know if you can answer this, but it asked, how could one find a therapist who is appropriately trained to work with trans youth or a person of the transgender community? Would you be able to advise on that?
It kind of depends on the location. I was very fortunate because I was in the Washington DC area when I transitioned quite late in life, actually. But so I just through my networks, and a lot of it just look at your networks, talk to trans people, and a lot of them know. I think locally, probably, Center on Colfax is probably a um, good resource. They may even have some others listed in the resources that I put on there they're not coming to mind. One Colorado might also have some, connections, and and I think there is another organization or two even locally. I don't know about rural areas. I don't know about the Western Slope off the top of my head, but usually if you ask enough questions, you can, get some connections and find folks. And it really is important to find a specialist that really in this area of, gender identities. Sort of a regular social worker or psychologist may not have the experience to be able to guide you very much.
We're coming up toward the end of our hour. And before we close, I'd like to give anybody a chance to ask another question if they have one, or if anybody has a comment, please raise your hand. And I'd also like to remind everybody that this is just the introduction to the trans community that we're starting our series with. The next program will be trans individuals telling their story in their own words. And Jenna will probably be the moderator of that. We also plan to have at least one on how to be an ally, and possibly another one on getting a medical provider and a mental health provider to talk about gender affirming care. If you have any other issues that you'd like us to address, I know that there are a lot of issues associated with with trans individuals, perhaps one about trans issues with minors. There's a lot of school issues going on. So if you have any suggestions, please enter them in the chat. And I hope that you felt this was useful. I'm glad that so many people signed on, and hopefully you'll join us again in a couple weeks. So thank you very much. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Shauna. You guys did a great job. I think everybody's appreciative. So thank you. And I'm going to leave the chat up for a little while so everybody could take a look at it if they'd like. Great job, Jenna. Great job, Shauna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
I think you guys would be really interested in the chat too, so take a look.
I've been following it. It's great.
Trying to see about how to make a transcript.
We need to, because there's a
Yes,
lot in here.
save.
We're gonna get one. We get one every time from Jane.
It looks like it
Hey,
saved
Hyla,
it
how you
somewhere.
doing? Hyla. Hyla's my friend from Florida.
This has meant so much, and it's 2 hours later in Florida. But I was just writing, thank you for your honesty and your sincerity. I was in education for 41 years, and I told Kathy today I have had some very young children say to me, Ms. Mercer, I just want to be, and it was not their birth sex. I just want to be a girl, and or I just want to be a boy. And it's just honest. They're in their youth able to say, this is what I want. They
Gives me
know.
chills.
And one of the speakers from next for the next session might be my friend who's military. And one of the things that she says a lot is, if I had been able to service my authentic self, I could have been a better leader. I could have a better rapport with my troops. And I think that crosses into all of life. I mean, I kind of feel that way as well. If you're not burning up energy trying to fit in or being careful of what you had to say, things like that.
Jenna, I hope that I did your words justice.
You did great, Shauna.
You
Well,
did
thank-
wonderful, Shauna. Yeah, your delivery was far smoother and more articulate than mine could have been. So,
Well, I mean, it was really important to me that I portrayed your words in the best way I could. So hopefully
well,
that happened.
yeah, you hit it out of the park. Thank you.
Thank you. This is, I mean, this chat is amazing, and I think it's the best chat we've had. So many people were touched by this tonight, by you, Jenna, by your bravery and coming out there and answering questions. I mean, I'm just sitting here reading this chat, just loving it.